Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talk Math with your friends. This week, it's my pleasure to present Dr. Kamuela Yong, our speaker for the week, and he will talk to us about a building community of Indigenous mathematicians. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Yong.
Thank you. Thank you all for inviting me here, and then for all of you for joining us today. There are a lot of familiar faces that I see, familiar names, people that I've actually never met before. So yeah, like some of you I've only communicated by email, and now I'm seeing you for the first time. So I'm really excited to see some of your faces. I also I know Bellin likes to have his virtual background of where he's from, and so I was inspired. And yesterday, I drove over to my mom's house, which is 5 minutes away, and I took this beautiful picture behind me. So I'm not trying to rub it in or anything, but I am in Hawaii, so let's be honest. And this is I'm from Waimanalo, and this is the beach where I grew up. Right across the street actually is where I grew up. And if coming out in Disney Plus, I guess this summer, is the Doogie Howser reboot, Doogie Kamealoha, which will feature a native Hawaiian woman, girl, and the Doogie's house is like 2 houses that way. So anyway, they're filming today. But yes, so thank you all for. Yes, I'm kind of excited. It'll be it's an interesting reboot. So I'm digressing, but this is supposed to be a very conversational talk. This is the one where like you would I would sit on that table right in the front of the room, like facing you, and not really be talking. So we can start off by setting that tone. So this is this Doogie will feature a girl as the main star, and then her mom will be the chief of surgery. So it's women are the main characters. My problem with, at least from reading the synopsis, is that the dad is a native Hawaiian man, but the mom is a Caucasian woman, which is fine. But then the dad, the native Hawaiian, is playing a stereotype role. He sells flowers and shaved ice out of a truck. So it's progressive that that women are the main doctors, but on the other hand, the native Hawaiian is kind of perpetuating a stereotype. So I'm giving it a shot. Yes, Doogie digressions are welcome. Thank you for writing that in the chat. Anyway, so welcome. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about who I was, who I am, and then sort of dive into the community that we are all building together. There's a lot of us that are involved in building this community of Indigenous mathematicians. So I do have some slides that I'm gonna, let's see, let me, all right, so I do have some slides that we'll begin with. Okay, so I'm from Hawaii. I was born and raised. I'm a native Hawaiian, so I have ancestors that that dated back to Hawaii before Western settlers came in, and not to be confused with. So in Hawaii, we call native Hawaiians the people that are like the indigenous people of Hawaii, as opposed to some people would say you're a native Arizonan, which means that you're born from Arizona. So there's that distinction, just for some of you that may not be clear. For college, for my bachelor's, I went to California, Los Angeles. I went to Loyola Marymount University, and there I was majoring in engineering. I love math, but I wanted to major in engineering because what do you do with math, right? The obvious thing to do with math is to be an engineer, with most of the people that were that like math. And so I was in engineering, civil engineering, and along the way I took so many math classes because I loved it. I got a minor, and I said, well, let me just keep taking more. I ended up double majoring in math, applied math, and civil engineering. while I was at Loyola Marymount University, I met a mentor of mine, Erika Camacho. Some of you might know her. I now call her Tati or Tatiana. So Tati was my senior thesis mentor, and she really showed me what it was to be in applied math. And that really encouraged me and inspired me to really want to get a PhD. And yeah, so she really inspired me and showed me what I could do, things that I never realized I could do before. But Tati inspired me. She encouraged me to go to my first conference, which was the Joint Math Meetings, presented the work that we're doing together. And she even brought over the chair of the Iowa Math Department, University of Iowa. And I talked to him, and I was really inspired. And it was because of these connections that I got from my mentor that I decided, well, like, you know, I'll apply to math. I'll apply to the University of Iowa. So I went to Iowa. So I went to the University of Iowa. Now, mind you, I'm from Hawaii, going to LA and then going to Iowa. When I was on the plane, I did not know where Iowa was. You know, the plane has like that map with all the airports that the planes go to. I didn't realize that I flew over Iowa to get to Chicago going back. I didn't know. I mean, for me, Iowa was a flyover state, and I did not know. But I went there. I visited it. I loved the program, and so I chose the University of Iowa. And for me, it was a really great experience there. And I started that program in 2007. And now 2 years later, I had another mentor, a professor there, that said, you should really think about the SACNAS conference. So SACNAS is the Society for the Advancement of Chicano Native Americans in Sciences. And I went there. That was my second conference I went to. And when I was at the SACNAS conference, I met another graduate student who was a native Hawaiian, Lily Harbardo. She was working on her master's. She introduced me to well, she said, you know, there's a native Hawaiian woman here. She's not in math, but she's in biology, Healani Chang. And so I was just so excited to be in a space where there are, you know, people that kind of somewhat look like me. And I heard there's a native Hawaiian professor. I got really excited. So I remember the first time I saw her, I was going up an escalator and she was going down an escalator, but I spotted her because I know, you know, when you see someone from your home, you can spot them. And I saw her going down, and I'm like, oh, of course, all places, up an escalator, down an escalator. So I yelled out across the escalator. I said, hey, Alani, can you wait for me at the bottom? And, you know, and I got to go up and go up all the way back down. So I'm trying to frantically get down and catch her because, you know, here's this professor and I'm just a graduate student. And I'm trying to hold her up. And so I introduced myself to her. And she's been another lifetime mentor of mine ever since that one moment where I stopped trying the escalator. But the point is that for me to see a native Hawaiian, someone like me, just in STEM, was really big, because up until that moment, you know, all the people that I saw were really amazing mentors. Like Tati was a mentor, but you know, there was no one that was a native Hawaiian, someone like me. And so to see a native Hawaiian in STEM, just in general, was really inspiring for me to know that, you know, yeah, like we can do this. Our people are out there having something, but still, you know, no one in math. And that same conference, the very last morning, right before we left, I was talking to my another undergraduate professor that was there. And I said, you know, this is such a great, inspiring conference. I wish, you know, I could do something like this for native Hawaiian students. And then he said, have you heard of Rebecca Garcia? And Rebecca Garcia is a Chamorro, a native of Guam. And she happened to be like one table over from where I was sitting. I didn't know. I mean, it's a SACNAS can be a very large conference. And so, yeah, and SACNAS is a large conference, and I'm seeing some people ran into other mentors similar to where I have. Just you don't even know until like you just happen to see someone, happen to make these chance connections, And so even at a conference like SACNAS, where it's more focused on diversity, and the crowds might be smaller, and you're usually just in the convention center, as opposed to like GMM, where you might be in two different hotels, or you're scattered about. SACNAS, they try to keep you mainly in that one place, but yet still, even within the math community, you know, I didn't quite reach her. In fact, there are some people that I haven't reached at all physically in SACNAS, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so I met Rebecca Garcia, and she was the first Pacific Islander that I met in math, and it was just really inspiring for me. It gave me hope. And this was in 2009, and ever since then, you know, I would meet up with her at various conferences, and it would be just the two of us. We're the only two Pacific Islanders, in fact, only two Indigenous people that we knew of at that conference of thousands of people. So it did feel quite small, but knowing Rebecca was there, knowing that I had this support, I had this mentorship, just even, you know, if it's just two of us. So I go on, I get my PhD at the University of Iowa in 2012. Now this is 2012, and I become the first ever Native Hawaiian to get a PhD in applied math. And 2012 is not that long ago, right? It's still less than 10 years. And so this is me with my wife, and my parents, you know, the biggest supporters throughout my whole journey in life. And so it was quite a great accomplishment for me to get my PhD, you know, for my family, for everyone, really, just to know that, you know, that I'd made it. But then I also felt this big weight of responsibility, like, you know, all right, I have my PhD, what do I do with it? You know, I need to, you know, I need to start inspiring more students and getting N to be greater than 1. And well, 2012 happened to be a really great year. I started to work at an REU, and I met a student right there. I'll go with this. So I met a student, Kyle Dolan, who was at that REU. He was an undergraduate at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And then a few months later, I met Marissa Loving and Alyssa Loving, and they came to the Field of Dreams conference. So going from really not having met many Native Hawaiians, and I meet 3 undergraduates all in a span of a few months, it kind of just really got me motivated. And then around the same time, Rebecca had started her own REU at the University of Hawaii Hilo, and so she was bringing some people, and that's where you'll see Ashley. Ashley was also working on her, was helping out with the REU, and so I went from, you know, just having just this a bubble of really just me to a couple of people. And then Kyle started to introduce me to another Native Hawaiian who was working on his PhD in applied math at Michigan. And so I started to feel, well, there's more people, although I'm the first, but, you know, I can, you know, like, let's kind of keep each other connected. And of course, I didn't do the best job at that time of staying in touch with everyone. And in fact, Kyle and Marissa, they went to these two people, they went to graduate school in Illinois and Indiana, and they were fairly close to each other. And I didn't think to connect them. And I just thought, wow, you know, all these times you have someone from Hawaii living in the Midwest, and you know, like, they're so close. Why didn't I think to make these connections? But you know, we started to get through. They started to go into graduate school, and the numbers started graduating. We got more people getting their PhD, and SACNAS came to Hawaii in 2019. So remind you, I got my PhD in 2012, and then in 2019, SACNAS came to Hawaii, and we had enough people that for the first time ever, we could have a session for Pacific Islanders. So we had a session that was dedicated, while SACNAS was in the Pacific Islands, to have a session of Pacific Islanders. And so this is the session that we had. And it was really like the energy that in the room, like it's hard to describe, because knowing that for years Rebecca and I were the only Pacific Islanders, in the entire conference, and then having enough people to have a whole session. So it really meant something. It was really just an experience to be in, and we felt so excited, and we said, what do we do? Like, let's keep this going. Like, what are we doing? So we had a working dinner afterwards and said, well, what do we want to do? Like, let's keep this momentum. We're starting to get people. What's next? And we started brainstorming, thinking about what would happen. And last summer was when we finally had time to really collect ourselves, and we said, let's bring people together. Let's start this group, Indigenous Mathematicians. And so we started indigenousmathematicians.org. And the point was to bring people together. And we said, who are all the Indigenous people that we know? Or who are all the Pacific Islanders we know? And there were very few. When we started last summer, we had fewer than 10 people. Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, we just did not know of many people. We started looking just like at different universities throughout the Pacific. Maybe, we could find other Pacific Islanders. We really didn't know who was out there. But we knew that there's got to be people out there. And the AMS publishes data every year on who are the new PhDs, and there's like 1 to 3 people in they get a PhD that are Pacific Islander, Native Hawaiian, as well as Native American. And so we know that people are getting their degrees, but who are these people? Are they isolated? Are they not? Are they not in our circle? Do they feel like they're the only ones? So we didn't know who these people were. We started with our very small network with just the few of us. We started reaching out to people, people that gave talks, people that that somehow we could identify, and word of mouth, and it started to get out there. So here's sort of like a little timeline of what was happening. So in 2009, that's when I first met the first person for me, in Rebecca Garcia, who got her PhD in math, and I met another Native Hawaiian. I got my PhD in 2012. I met some other students in 2012. David Prigi became the second Native Hawaiian to get his PhD in applied math in 2016. Marissa became the first woman to get a PhD in math in 2019. Last year, Kyle got his, and coming up this year, Ashley's going to become the second woman in pure math. And along this way, so we're starting to gather momentum, and we're trying to find out like where to go, what to do. So once we started to launch Indigenous Mathematicians, we reached out to people and we said, do you know any other people? And someone would say, yeah, I know like this other person. And then we'd reach to that person. They might know 2 other people. We would look on websites, and I started sending cold call emails saying, hi, my name is Kamuela Yong. I'm a mathematician. I'm Native Hawaiian. I believe, you might fall under this category. Would you be interested in doing this? And while we're doing that, we found out who were the first people that got their PhDs. And to the best of our knowledge, in 1964, there were 2 people that got their PhDs. 2 people got their PhDs in 1964. But before that, there weren't any. And after that, we don't have anyone until the mid 80s. So there's this long, like this 20-year gap without anything. And of course, there might be people in that period. It's hard to tell. There's just a lot that we don't know. But from from our outreach, reaching across to people, we start to get more and more people. And right now we have 33 people with a doctorate in math, and this is across. So as we start to reach out, we reach to First Nations, our brothers and sisters in First Nations, as well as across the Pacific and in Australia. And I know there's a couple more, but I just haven't made contact with them yet, as well as 13 doctoral students across the same region. So we have people from, various people, and this is a long way away from when we just had fewer than 10. We could count them because there was this person, this person, this person, and still 46 is not an outstanding number, but it's more than what we knew, and it was far greater than the number that we had ever imagined, because we were thinking we'd be lucky if we get 20, and so to have 40 is just great. And each time we think we found it all, and then someone else pops onto our radar. Someone will see an announcement on through AMS or through MAA or through Talk Math with your professor, with your friends, and they find out about this, and then they get in contact with us. And we only launched our website at the end of 2020, and so we're starting to get more and more people. People are reaching out to us. In this last SACNAS conference at 2020, it was online, and the online feature has a way you could search by tribal affiliation, as well as filter by discipline. And I found someone else, Joe Hibden, who's here. I think he's still here. I found him, and he and I had actually been going to SACNAS for 10 years together. So as big as SACNAS was, or as small as the math community in SACNAS was, however you want to think about it, we have been going to the same conference, and there's only like 2 or 3 rooms with math. We've been going to the same conference for a decade, and we had never somehow talked to each other. Hi, Joe. So we'd never talked to each other, or at least in the context of our ethnic identity. And so it just kind of baffles me how there are these connections where we could have been bonding, we could have been helping each other over this shared identity. We got our PhDs a year apart from each other, so we were at that same stage in our careers too, as graduate students, as early career mathematicians, and now, as we're progressing, to have had this missed opportunity to share, to support each other and amplify each other's voices. It was so shocking to me to how could I have missed this? How do we miss this? And of course, we don't walk around like with a badge saying I'm Native Hawaiian. So these are connections that we might, we don't know. How would we even begin these conversations? And so once I connected with Joe, he's just been a big help as we're forming the community, as we're taking the next steps. But really, how many other connections are there like Joe and I who have like probably maybe sat at the same lunch table together, but it just never came up because we're at the lunch table because of mutual friends. And so and yeah, like we just don't know. There's just a lot of people out there. And another thing that happened as we started to build the community. So the website has been dropped in the chat, indigenousmathematicians.org. And I can pull back to the sliding. So indigenousmathematicians.org, there's a tab for profiles. In fact, let me go ahead and I'll share this with share screen so you can kind of see what we have. And of course, feel free to start just talking if anyone has anything you want to add.
So this is a beautiful, very human story of making connections, but it started with, I went to LA. Oh, sorry, my cats are fighting. Kittens. Like you went away to LA and sort of like everything else you were like going towards a connection. So like what brought you to engineering and what brought you to LA? Was it like a different version of that story or something different?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So what brought me to LA is that I kind of wanted to just get off the island. There was a lot that, Hawaii is beautiful. I loved it, but I wanted to try something new. I just wanted to be in a place where, you could drive for 45 minutes and not hit the beach. Right. I like, I don't know, maybe you would love to drive for 45 minutes and only hit beach wherever you go.
Yeah. As someone who lives in Iowa, you have made a big trade.
But, so I wanted to go somewhere where it was different. There were road trips, there's amusement parks, there's shows and concerts and whatnot, things to try. And so I did want to move away just to get that experience. And college is finite. Hopefully, for most of our students, college is finite. And so after you get your degree, then I would come back home. I had that experience. I could, just move away. Yes, and also in LA, 45 minutes won't get you anywhere. So, but that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to LA, to California. It was still close enough to home, but with
direct flights
the experience, yeah, there are direct flights. There are Hawaiian barbecues. It was at least, it was a stepping stone, and I thought that was it. Iowa, there's no beaches, there's no direct flights, there's no Hawaiian barbecues anywhere in Iowa, but that was all right. Now the other thing that that was mentioned in the chat was that these misconnections that we have, that these misconnections, like I was fortunate enough to be at a conference, to actually physically be in the conference, to have that misconnection. How many other people are there, especially people that aren't, that don't know that they should be at a conference? I only went to SACNAS because I had a mentor that says, you should check out this conference. It's called SACNAS. And he told me, he said, it stands for Chicano and Native Americans. As a Native Hawaiian, you may not feel like that's, identifying you exactly, but it would be a really, we've had students to go and they've had a really great time from this conference. You should really think about it. And it was because of connections like that I was fortunate to go, that I was fortunate enough to get a travel scholarship from them, or to have things paid for. Not everyone has that luck that I do. They might there not be funding for them, they not know about it, they not have those just those connections. And I think that's where just having allies, having mentors, regardless of who you are, being classmates, being professors, just whatever, to be a mentor, you can make a difference in anybody's life. You don't have to necessarily identify with them, but just know that, like, these are things that you as a student can take advantage of. It would be great. And so I was fortunate to have someone point me in that direction, to put me there. And of course, now Joy and I, we missed each other's path for a decade, but I did meet Rebecca, and so I did meet other connections. But yeah, like, so having yeah, sorry, Joe, he's got to go. But yeah, there's a lot of connections that are still waiting to be out there. How many people didn't have a professor tell them to go to the conference? How many people didn't have anyone in there to say, check out this community, check out this other stuff? So part of this community that we're building is to bring that conference to you, so that you don't need to go to the conference and go to the special session on where we have the featured Pacific Islanders in math. So you don't need to go to the conference where we can talk and have get together. You can go, you can just log onto a website, and still it's hard because how do we get the word out there? How do we know? How do students know who what to look for. And so we're still struggling with that. I mean, we're brand new, but let me kind of walk you through some of the website. And I do apologize, though I have very limited website building skills, and as well as very limited time, but we are working on a grant, and soon we'll be able to have a webmaster actually do this all for you. So this is our website, and if you do have any questions, please do email us. If you have people that could benefit from here, let us know. But this map shows us where all the Indigenous people that we've identified are located throughout. And you can see we have a lot of people in North America, as well as Pacifica and Australia. So we are getting the word out there. We have people kind of spread through all over. And the big thing, so we have a newsletter too. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can sign up here, or you can just read past issues. But this profiles, and we're building it right now, but the profiles kind of walk you through all the people with PhDs or working on PhDs. We are going to be expanding it to people who have a terminal degree as like a master's, but we're still working on it. The first two people to get their PhD, and they both got it in the same year, was Edwin Mo'okini and then Tom Storer. And they both got their PhDs. Again, had they had, like Facebook back in 1964, maybe Edwin and Tom would have known each other, because they got their PhD from UCLA and USC in the same year. So, they could have just sent a text and be like, hey, you want to go study wherever. But this is 1964. And so they both got their PhDs in the exact same year, which I think was kind of amazing, and in the same city. So, but then again, there's 20 years before the next person, and you can kind of just go through here. We try to put faces to the names, just so we're going to be adding onto here, where you can then click on the name and you can read more about the profiles. Hopefully we're going to be able to do that this summer when we have more time. And there's just so many people. Just so many people out here. Let me go back up. So David, I don't know if he's on here or still here. Many of you may know David Austin. And once we started building this website and getting graduate students, I think some of them might be here. He was looking through it, and he noticed that there were people that were also Choctaw graduate students. And so he asked me, and then we connected, and David, now has these connections with grad students that have the exact same background as him. And David went, after he got his PhD in 1989, I want to say it was 5 or 10 years before he met another Native American that also had a PhD in math. So I mean, it is something. I showed you the graphical representation of how the numbers have increased. And we have more people, especially in the 2000s, and recently we're getting at least one a year. And then grad student Ashley's this year, and then we have several people coming up in the next few years. So hi Danny, you're here. And so we have lots of people around. But this is our website. We're still trying to do things with it. If anyone has any suggestions, I would love to hear it. But we're building up. We're forming more. Trying to get the word out there, and then people find our website. People end up Googling, they find things. But oh, someone did have a question. A picture of Tom Storer. So there is a picture of Tom out there, I think like one picture, but after talking with people that know him, Tom had passed away, but he preferred to not have his image used for religious reasons, and so we don't use that. But thank you for pointing that out, because some of these people, like, I can't find their images, and some people, yeah, and some of them I've even emailed and said, I don't even have a picture available. So, but other ones we're working on. Now, while working on this as well, let me now shift back to the slides because I got one more thing. So while working on this, I did find out about this woman named Mary Ross. So she is kind of like our own hidden figure. She was born in 1908. She passed away just before she turned 100. And she's a member of the Cherokee Nation. She got her master's in math in 1938. She worked as a mathematician at Lockheed, working on one of the fighter planes. She was the first Native American female engineer at Lockheed, the first female engineer in general at Lockheed. And yeah, so she there's just stuff that I didn't know. I think this would be, a great story to find more about her life and what she did. But to think, this is 1930s to have a female Cherokee woman working for Lockheed. That's a really interesting thing for me to think about. So I'm gonna pause here and let other people chime in, questions that you might have, comments that you might have. No,
I have two, but I've already asked one. So if other people want to go first, that's fine. Well, I'll ask so the session at SACNAS sounds really where we're actually featuring the work, the research of the Pacific Islander scholars. Made me wonder, you've mostly been talking about finding human connections, but I bet you're so connecting based on your identities. I bet you also connect based on your work, and also maybe that your identity connects with your work. And so I was just wondering if you could comment on that sort of dimension of all of this.
That's great. That's it's like you read my slides. That's my next slide that I had available for yeah, really great timing. So I do want to make the point that there's a big distinction between being an Indigenous mathematician and as an Indigenous person who does math and Indigenous mathematics. So there are two distinct things, right? You can be just like a stellar mathematician or even just a mediocre mathematician and happen to be of a descendant, of an Indigenous person. And that's great. And that's fine because, all of us are mathematicians and we have some sort of ancestry that ties us back to our own, our own families. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with an Indigenous person not having any sort of, not necessarily practicing Indigenous knowledge in their work. There are some people that do that, and some places they call it ethnomathematics. So at the University of Hawaii Manoa, they have the world's first ethnomathematics certificate for graduate students, and it's in the College of Education, and they teach math for teachers on incorporating cultural knowledge into their math curriculum. So there are two things. I just want to make sure that there's that distinction, and yeah, and so I guess while I started off at the University of Hawaii, so I'm back in Hawaii after going through getting a postdoc at Arizona State and then moving back to Hawaii. I felt, wow, I really I heard of this ethnomath. I want to connect with the students, but I have no idea how to incorporate cultural knowledge into my classroom. And I kind of felt for a bit like, I'm a bad Native person. Like I don't know how to do this. Does that make me bad? No. One, we define our own selves to however we want to be. If you're good at math, at just being a mathematician, then that's fine. If you want, however you want to tie in what you know. So I kind of went through that, but then what I wanted to do is I wanted to encourage more Native Hawaiians, more people in the Pacific to explore math. So how do I do that? And it wasn't until just after my 5th year working here that I really start to do it. And so for me, it was a hard step, just like for many of us in our classrooms. If you're trying to change your curriculum, change the way you teach, have more group work, have more active learning, it takes a big leap of faith to kind of push away the thing that you're so comfortable with and try something new. And so what I did this past summer was with the help of a workshop that we had that was funded by NSF, an NSF grant that we had, I reimagined my pre-calculus course through Polynesian navigation. Okay, and so let me go back to my slide just to show you what I mean by some of that. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about, or that I'm talking about in my course, is I'm teaching the students navigation, and I'm teaching them trig and pre-calc. I knew very little navigation. I spent hours every day this summer looking at the Polynesian navigation website because I did not know. I knew just the bare minimum. So I learned how they do these things. And so this right here is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, as some people might know it as. That's the one with the big stone heads, right? The morai. And Easter Island, Rapa Nui, makes the easternmost part of the Polynesian Triangle. So the Polynesian Triangle, if you've heard of that, is where Polynesia, Hawaii is on the tip. And then one end is Easter Island, Rapa Nui, and the other end is New Zealand, or Aotearoa. And so that sort of forms the Pacific Triangle, and then all the Pacific Islands fall, Polynesian Triangle, and all the Polynesian islands fall within it. And so Rapa Nui is the most isolated island chain or island in the world. So many of the islands are in a chain of islands, like the Hawaiian Islands. There's Oahu, there's Maui, there's Kauai, there's the Big Island or Hawaii Island. Tahiti, there's several atolls, but Rapa Nui is just a single island. So if you miss that island, you're voyaging using traditional knowledges. And if you don't know what I mean, you can watch Moana. Moana at least gives you an idea of the things that they look at. So if you're sailing for Rapa Nui, you have one island. So you can't hope, like when we sail to Tahiti, we kind of aim for the middle and hope, if we're off course a little bit, we're still going to hit one of the atolls, and then we kind of get our bearings to go to the place we're trying to get. But here you have one island, and if you miss it, you're out of luck. Next thing you know, you're if you're heading east, you land in Chile, and if you head west, then you land somewhere in the Pacific. But so it can be really difficult, and you want to know how close you are before you see it. And so Rapa Nui is actually a pretty small island. It's only the highest point is 1,663 feet. And so if you're going there, 1,663 isn't that high. And then when you factor in the curvature of the earth, really how high is that? And so in our class, we talk about sailing. When you start to approach land, what are things that you notice? You might notice land-based birds that they'll fly out to sea, they'll hunt and they'll fish, and they come back. So if you see them, you got to be within the range of these land-based birds. You might notice some vegetation that's washed off from a storm. If it's still green, you're close to land. As you approach land, clouds right here. Clouds kind of form over mountains, over land. So you'll see that you'll see the reflection of the sky changes. So you start to notice all these things as you get closer to land. So I teach the students about that, but then how close do you have to be before you spot the land? That's the thing, because you want to know, we better be pretty close. And so this ends up being an inverse trig problem. You sort of draw your Earth, you draw like a circle, you have the radius of the Earth, but the height of the mountain kind of adds up. So you have this, and then you have this right triangle to figure out that angle from like where the canoe is at to where the top of the mountain is at. You have this. Once you got that, then you find your angle, and then you can find that the proportion of the angle to 360 or 2 pi is the same proportion of the arc length to the circumference of the Earth. So we do this, and then they can find out, oh my gosh, I got to be within 50 miles from the island. If we're like 55 miles from the island, we're not going to see it, and we're just going to sail right past it. So you got to be pretty spot on. But then we do the same thing. What about if you're going to Hawaii? Not only is there a whole bunch of island chains, but Mauna Kea, the largest island, it's really high. That's where they put, it's the tallest mountain if measured from the base, which goes way underwater to the top, taller than Everest. But you can see Mauna Kea if you are more than 100 miles away. So these are all things that I'm starting to learn, to reimagine, and things that our navigators know. If you're sailing in a path and then you end up going off course by a certain amount, the navigators know if you sail for like 1 day in one unit off course, how far that is. They've internalized it. But what that is just right triangles. If you know your angle and you know how far you've sailed, then you know the distance you've gone off course. We know the trig. That's stuff that we're good at. The navigators they internalize it because they have to feel it. They can feel, if you've traveled off this far, then they know. So those are things that navigators do, but how do they know it? And we teach them math. And this is the way they get students really interested. They get students that they're like, wow, it's an exploratory type of thing. And so, yeah, a year ago I had none of this in my classroom, but now I'm starting to include it. And that's partly because I'm at a school where is mainly teaching, so I'm able to have that time to explore how to teach, how to work in my curriculum. If I were at a school where I had to do more time research, I may not have had this opportunity. But these are ways that I'm doing to encourage students. So yeah, I'll kind of pause right here and open it up for discussion again.
Okay. Someone else before I do my third one.
Well, I knew growing up in Hilo, we learned about the Hokulea journey, right? And it's something that gets brought up a lot. One of the significances of the Hokulea journey is when they recreated, right, the navigation, I think from Rapa Nui to Hawaii, was that there was a lot of I don't know, anthropologists maybe who didn't believe that the native Polynesians had the knowledge or the capability to make that journey because of the precision involved. So they recreated the journey with the techniques that they would have had, right? And they were able to reproduce the results, basically, the journey. And so that stuck with me. That was always a really cool thing, learning about it as a kid. And it's one of it's something that I don't think happens in a lot of curricula elsewhere, where native knowledge or native the expertise that native people had is highlighted in school curricula. So I just wanted to. That wasn't a question, I guess, but I have had a strong connection feeling to that as a kid, so I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders do have. We've been lucky. There's a strong movement to to keep the Hawaiian language. We have charter schools where students are taught in the Hawaiian language. Just the whole Polynesian Voyaging Society, it was a group of people that got together and said they want to figure this out, and they searched across the world who could teach them this lost art of sailing, and they found Papa Mao, this guy from Micronesia, and to help teach them, because there's only one person that was willing to teach them in the whole world how to sail by stars, because it was a form that we knew we had, we just it's been lost, and it was lost across most of the Pacific. But now they know it, and they're perpetuating that culture and that language. There are other cultures where the language is starting to die, where this ancestral knowledge is lost, and when it's lost forever. And so, with ethnomath, we're perpetuating culture as well as math, and trying to reach students by speaking to things that's dear to their hearts, that their culture, their ancestry, knowing that their ancestors didn't just sit on a raft and drift across the ocean and happen to hit an island, that they knew exactly where to go, and this is the math that explains what's going on. That's stuff that we can teach. But there are a lot of instances across Indigenous cultures around the world where they have this sort of knowledge that they can share as well. But
Joshua asked a question in the chat. What are some differences between working in a culture with a strong preservation tradition and one that doesn't have one yet? Joshua, you want to
No, this is really vague, but I heard you mentioning the fact that the Hawaiian islands have a strong tradition of preserving the language, and I'm wondering if you have experience with cultures that are in different situations, and some are more isolated and some are less. And
so I don't necessarily know if I've been working with them, but I did have, there was a gathering 2 years ago, and it was about Indigenous language, and it wasn't mathematicians, but it was people from various regions in Alaska, and they came and they were so inspired to see how the Hawaiian language is living in, and it made me feel very privileged to have that opportunity to be able to share that. But at the same time, I saw them, and they were looking at the different vegetation and figuring out which one was worth eating and which one could what they could do with it. And I realized, wow, like there's this whole other knowledge that I don't even know that I guess we can all share and we can all learn from.
thanks.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so just kind of bringing back to the whole Indigenous mathematicians, having ways to get the word out, just having a student, having a mid-career person see that wow, I thought really I was the only one. I've been attending JMM, but when there's thousands of people and hundreds of sessions, it's so easy. Like I've had friends where I completely missed them at JMM because I didn't even know they were there. So having times where you don't have these chance encounters and missing them, we're trying to find a place where we can say, hey, look, like we're here, we can work this out, we can be there to support you, even if it's just to know I'm not the only one, because a lot of us have felt that pressure, feeling that, I'm the first, or I'm the only one from my town, I'm the only one from whatever community you identify with. But then you feel that you have that pressure, that you have to succeed, that you have to be, the ideal model, because if you don't, then you're going to let a lot of people down. So knowing that there's other people out here to continue to just take that burden off of you, and having allies, before I knew of other Indigenous people and Pacific Islanders, I was always welcomed by every community, by the Black and Hispanic communities. They've welcomed me into their spaces, and just having allies saying, you can hang with us until you're ready, and now it's time that we're ready to start our own community, because we realize we do have enough people to start this community. It's small enough where we can still send one big group email if we wanted to, but I'm not about to blast everyone's email, but it is small enough where in theory I could send an email. It's smaller than some of your department emails, I'm sure. So it, like, we do have this community, and we're trying to get the word out, just trying to make people feel welcome, to get that pressure off of them. Yeah.
Danny, did you have something you wanted to ask or say? Did I see you on mute earlier?
Did you say Danny or me?
Danny, but oh, sorry, I thought I saw you on mute earlier.
I would like to hear what Vela has to say.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Willie was saying about our Indigenous ancestors who may internalize knowledge. And I think that kind of goes into what dominant society thinks is what counts as preserving knowledge. And often dominant society thinks that preserving knowledge means writing things in books or in stones, and that's how knowledge gets preserved and then passed on. For many Native communities, when we say we internalize knowledge, that doesn't mean that it doesn't get passed on. It gets passed on through that kinship in that community and those families, and it gets preserved and built on in other ways. And it's preserved in those languages and those cultures too. So when there are active forces that are working to disrupt practicing those languages, practicing those cultures, practicing and disrupting those kinships, then so does those forces work against passing on that knowledge and that mathematical knowledge. And it's not because we're not, when we talk about those knowledges and traditions and languages being lost, it's not because a lack of want to preserve or a lack of want to pass on knowledges. It's active and ongoing forces that are working to disrupt that those traditions, those cultures, and those languages. And when that happens, and so that also disrupts the capacity to pass on knowledges. And so one thing that I think is really great about the building community is understanding that community aspect, and that that tradition of caring for each other and caring for each other as humans, and caring for each other as humans in this world, and our connections to the lands and waters. And I think Wayla talks about a lot of interesting things about what it means to be a mathematician, what it means to be Indigenous, and we're grappling with both what it means to be a mathematician and what it means to be Indigenous in the 21st century. Knowing that there's been disruptions and there are ongoing disruptions, and wanting to reconnect with that, but also what does it mean now and what does it mean for our futures? And so I think there's a lot of significance with this building community that's really exciting about not just being compartmentalized and individualized, but coming together again and recreating ourselves in 2021, a space where we can have community once again, and where we can simultaneously look back and connect to the knowledges of our past, look at our present, and have some visioning for our futures.
Thank you. Dr. Yong, do you want to say anything before we wrap up?
No, I guess sure. Thank you all for joining me here. But really, like, this effort is, I mean, building a community takes community. Okay? I'm not doing this alone. There are so many people that are helping us every step of the way, and there are so many people that got me here. From like my teachers in high school that encouraged me to go to college and succeed, my college professors that encouraged me just to do that, and I guess One thing I did forget to mention, but when I was a graduate student, I was very close to quitting, and I thought I didn't belong. I thought I wasn't cut out for it. I thought that the University of Iowa accepted me because they wanted to have their token native Hawaiian. That, you know, it just wasn't for me. I called up Erika Camacho, Tati, and we talked for hours. She walked me back. She said, "It's okay. It's normal. This is grad school." And like, that's how everyone feels. I had other students who were a year ahead of me, and I talked to them, and they said, "Yeah, dude, like, that's how I felt." That, you know, it's just people are afraid to let their true feelings be shown, that they are lost, and so they just put on that face that says, "Yeah, like, I know what's going on." And so by having all those people help me, because, you know, had I left graduate school when I thought I wasn't cut out for it because I didn't understand what was going on, and come find out that everyone else is there, I wouldn't be here. You know, had someone not introduced me to SACNAS, had someone not, you know, everything, I wouldn't be the position I was at. I wouldn't be, you know, anywhere. And I think just having allies, having friends, being supportive in any way that you can. You know, you never know, like, how that one thing that you do for a student or for a colleague can, you know, really impact their lives and impact like a whole community now. And you can see where we're going. So yeah, thank you all for being allies in your own way, and for all of the people in your own communities. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Awesome. Please, everyone, join me in thanking Dr. Kamuela Yong for today's session. And I'll just screen share next week's abstract so that it's up there. Thank you, everybody. And I will stop the recording.